The agenda this week assessed progress on making Ontario more barrier-free for those with accessibility issues, weighed the efficacy of a new smaller city council in the provincial capital, and tuned in to the last week of Alberta's election campaign. The agenda's Week in Review begins examining the fine print in the just-released Ontario budget. Can I put this to the President of the Treasury Board? You know, my hunch is some of your more ardent Conservative supporters are going to be disappointed with this budget because they don't think you were tough enough on spending. Could you address that?
Well, I think we're being fair, and I think we're being responsible to address the education issue. I think all parents of all stripes and the students who were falling behind in math, that's what matters. In the last 15 years, under the previous Liberal government, 13,000 new teachers were hired, 9,000 early childhood educators. Enrollment went down 1% at the same time. But what was even worse was that the math scores went down. So I think what Ontarians and the parents and the students, we're investing in them. We're investing in providing more supports for teachers to have the math skills so that they can teach math. You know, I'm a math guy. I spent my whole career with numbers. Financial literacy is very important, something you championed. We got to do a lot better in financial literacy. We have to do more in the technology areas. We have to do more in arts. We have to do it in a range of things, but the previous government didn't hit the benchmarks. We're investing in the students, and I think the parents are very supportive.
So
I do want to say that, you know, as former Minister of Education, there is no question that we have to do more on math. That was something that I talked about and put programs in place. In fact, many of the same concepts are being utilized today as if they're new. They're not new. But when we inherited the education system from long ago, it was devastated. You know, to a full third of students were not graduating high school at that point. So the entire system had to be rebuilt, reinvested in. Yes, we had to bring in more of those teachers, those caring adults into the classroom, and to invest in our students' education. So, you know, I don't think that this government should be talking down education. You should be looking at the ambition through education and saying, what do we need to do to make sure we prepare our students and our young people for that future? And
let him have a quick word back, then I'll get Stacey.
Well, I sit beside the Minister of Education. Every day she talks about building students up, building our teachers up, giving them more tools, giving them more, taking cell phones out. Maybe that's one thing we're taking out so they don't get distracted. We're falling behind not only in this country in math scores, we're falling behind against other nations. And we've got to invest in our children and for the jobs of tomorrow that you talked about. So I think we've got a great story to tell on the education side. And I think the people of Ontario are going to support us.
I think the budget numbers show, Stacey, that the government plans to invest $1 billion more over the next several years in education, which they would say fulfills the promise they made. What's your view?
Well, my concern is that if you look at the Financial Accountability Office numbers that just tracked how much we should spend to keep up with inflation rates and population, we're down by $6 billion for education in this budget. And so that is actually quite a huge difference between the $1 billion, right?
So the billion doesn't go very far as you're concerned?
No, it's not going to go very far, and I think that we have to be really careful about doing things like politicizing math. We should be using evidence-based decision-making, ensuring that we have experts making the decisions on how it is that we are helping our students thrive and succeed in this ever-changing economy that we need to prepare them for.
Let me ask the official opposition critic for finance here, if there was a missed opportunity in this budget, what would you point to?
Well, we have discussed the $1 billion that have been taken out of the Children and Community Social Services budget. And so the missed opportunity is to invest in the most vulnerable people in our community, in our children. I mean, we have had families and parents with children living with autism on the front lawn protesting, looking for real answers, looking to understand how their services are going to be impacted. And there's nothing in this budget that addresses that. There's nothing in this budget that gives parents relief. I mean, they're living in uncertainty, they're living in fear, and the missed opportunity here was to provide real relief for families that are currently really have no idea what their future is going to be like for their services for their children. You know, it's a missed opportunity to provide the relief that families so desperately need.
There is a federal election later this year. I wonder if you think it was somewhere in the back of the Ontario government's mind that if they're going to toss Andrew Scheer a bone, they better not bring out a budget that's going to make people hate Conservatives 7 months from now. Do you think that was part of the calculation?
It's possible. I understand that some of Stephen Harper's team is working with Doug Ford now, and so it's entirely possible that's the kind of advice that they would have been giving him. But I think that what they did in this budget actually is do deep cuts and then kind of did some sleight of hand over top of it. So I don't think that was really, I think what they were trying to do is tell Ontarians two different stories. One with the words that they used and another with the numbers. And they hope you pay attention to the words and don't look at the numbers. And this is just like when they're talking about math. So when they were saying that math scores have gone down. Well, that's only for grade 6 students. It actually went up for grade 9 students and for grade 3 students. So they cherry picked this one thing and talk about it, and they didn't talk about the bigger picture, right? So they cherry picked what they wanted to talk about. Those were the things that they wanted. They hope that you get distracted by that and pay attention to the blue license plate, get mad about some of the things, like maybe you're mad about them spending money on propaganda against the carbon tax, right? Like why is a government concerned about efficiencies actually wasting money on this?
I was actually going to put that to Jeff. You know, the expression job-killing carbon tax is all over this budget, and I wonder if you think that that's an attempt by the Conservative government of Ontario to help out the federal Conservative leader, you know, whose votes he's going to be looking for 6 months down the road.
I think that it can suit their purposes, or suit them for that purpose, as well as for their own purposes too. I mean, you know, that was something that they have talked about for a long time. And I think too that, you know, part of the budget is they do need to still run the province and to set some priorities for that. And also at the same time too, the Liberal government in Ottawa is sort of making some trouble for themselves on that front, so they seem to be having a bit of a time. But yeah, I mean, it is probably fair to say that all of those mentions in the budget, you know, some of them have to be aimed in Ottawa's direction.
Finn, let me set up the question for you in a somewhat different way. We remember 15 years ago, Dalton McGuinty's first budget brought in a new healthcare levy. And then several months later, when Paul Martin went to the polls, it really affected him. His popularity as a Liberal suffered in Ontario because of that first McGuinty budget. How do you imagine this budget having an impact on the federal campaign in October?
Well, being resolutely nonpartisan, I couldn't possibly comment on the political machinations.
Having said that,
without expressing any view on the wisdom, for instance, of having a carbon tax or not having one, or a cap-and-trade system, it's correct to observe that if you don't have one, your growth prospects are probably stronger and you'll probably have more investment and create more jobs. Whether you think that is a good thing or a bad thing, or it's the best way to approach the environment, is a completely different question.
I mean, that's questionable, though, because renewable energy is actually a growth sector. There's more money going into that sector.
Well, that's what Mr. McGuinty's government thought, too.
Well, no, that's actually what big financial international firms are looking at. They're investing more of their money into renewable energy than they are into old stuff like coal or even natural gas. So I think that we're past the point where you can say that a carbon tax slows the economy down or cap and trade slows the economy down. We're actually into the point where the transition is happening, and the smart money, the smart places to invest are in renewable energy, are in retrofits for buildings, are in getting this transition happening.
what does your research show in terms of how much more difficult it is to attend to the needs of 120,000 people instead of 60 or 70,000?
Clearly, it's a challenge, and I really commend the councillors for making a decision first to increase the staff available and to make sure that there are still avenues for constituents to reach their offices. But I think what's also at play here is, so first, just put it on the table. There was no magic number for the perfect amount of councillors that would somehow reach this pinnacle of democratic representation.
Well, the province picked what it picked because it's the same number of MPPs and the same number of MPs.
It's a matter of practicality.
Right.
It wasn't
so
based on any empirical
represent
evidence,
the same
right? And
Yep.
there's pros and cons to that. But I think one of the consequences that we're seeing, and that we'll see more and more, because we're still very early on in the term, and what I think we'll see more and more is that because of the demands placed on yourselves and your colleagues and the offices in terms of constituency work, we might start losing track of the bigger picture issues, the citywide issues that we are all facing, that the challenges are mounting. And so when we're stuck focusing on all of the little things that need to be happening in our local neighborhoods, in our constituencies, it will be, I think, more difficult to focus on the bigger picture.
Hold off on that. I want to come back to that because that's a great point. But one of the reasons we were told that reducing the size of council was going to be beneficial to people was that it was going to save $25 million a year. It would cost less. Stephen, I just heard you say you've added to your staff in order to deal with all of the larger number of constituents that you have. If you've had to hire more people to do your job, I presume you haven't been able to save any money. Is that right?
I don't agree with that. There's still one less councillor's office when you consider the circle drawn around my ward. So that's less of a councillor's salary and less of an army of people to support that. I incrementally increased the resources in my office. And I think that's an important point. Now, is there a magical amount of savings that's just around the council budget, and is it worth reducing council in half to save a few $1 million? That's a question that we can debate. But I'll leave you with this thought. You know, I always joke out in the West End in Etobicoke, there's a line worn on the carpet from my councillor's constituency office up to the Transportation Services Department. I spend a lot of time working with them because I get a lot of calls on transportation-related issues. But that manager that I deal with has to deal now with 5 councillors instead of 11. And so his workload has gone down. There's still a lot of calls and service requests, but his life has become much easier because of the amount of resources that he has to allocate dealing with less people. And that's where you begin to see some of the efficiency in the system that you can't put your finger on, but it's in there.
You looking at the look on her face?
Yeah.
She's looking very, you look like you're from Missouri right now.
Yeah. Well,
have you saved any money because it's a smaller council?
Dollars and cents. Look, councillors in the city of Toronto, prior to this change, cost each taxpayer about $13.40. And now we cost them $13. The reason being all that we have saved is the salary and the benefits of that councillor and maybe 1 or 2 staff members, because while we increase the envelope, I'm not using every single staff member allowable there. Stephen's not. But downtown councillors who have 120 and growing are using them all.
120,000.
Yeah, Kristen Wong Tam, for instance, we were so out of whack that Councillor Wong Tam in the downtown core has fewer constituents than she had before this change. That's how out of whack and inequitable it was. But the savings is really a false economy, just as it was when we amalgamated the city. We saved the few individual representatives, but at the end of the day, we burned through the mitigation money, and the cost of running the city is driven not by the politicians, but by the people themselves. And we have the same 3 million people. By the end of this year, we will be a population of 3 million, and they haven't changed. Their needs haven't changed. And the public service is finding that while there are fewer councillors, we're still addressing the needs of constituents, which means their workload has changed very little.
You have some pretty strong language in your report, and I want to read just one phrase here, because you compared services that disabled people now cannot access to the water fountains or the restaurants that African Americans were prohibited from using in the Deep South because of what was effectively apartheid in the Deep South 50 years ago. That is a tough comparison. Why do you feel it's apt?
Because it's deliberate. Not deliberate to discriminate, but it's deliberately placed on the basis of perception of aesthetic design as opposed to meeting the needs of some 20% of the population, inching closer to 20% of the population. There's a small little restaurant right near these studios that I encountered a couple of years ago when I attended the book launch of a friend of mine. And so we wanted to go to this restaurant. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure I know where it is. So let's go there. And we got there, and the first thing I saw as we approached the door was that there was an automatic door opener button with the blue wheelchair symbol on it. So I thought, oh, good, there's an automatic door. Before you could get through the door, you had to go up a step. So what was the point of the door? For a person like myself using an electric scooter or somebody using a wheelchair, the button was just useless. So now, on certain conditions, I can get up a step or two, and the friends I was with said, well, we'll just lift the scooter in if you can navigate this step. So we did, and in we went. There was a washroom inside, and I thought, well, I'm just going to make use of this. It had a wheelchair symbol outside of it. And they'd spent a lot of money renovating this washroom so that it was fully accessible, lots of room, not just for a tiny little scooter like mine, but if someone came in with a big power chair, if they could have gotten up that step, there was more than enough room. But I thought, so, okay, you've spent the money on renovating a washroom, you've spent the money on putting a power door at the front, but there's a step.
Can't get into the place.
Can't get into the place. And so the reality is that a lot of the changes that have been made because of the AODA have been made with people who have good intentions but really truly don't know what it is that they're doing or what is needed to be done.
Yvonne, as I get you into this conversation here, you've been here a couple times before, but on the chance that people didn't see those programs, you should just take a moment here to explain the visor that you're wearing right now and what it helps you do.
Sure. So I'm wearing something called eSight. It's a head-mounted display that actually allows me to access my remaining functional vision. So this is something that was not available a few years ago, but it's available now, and there are other devices just like this that are for partial sight as opposed to sight substitution. This is sight enhancement.
Gotcha. I want to pluck another line out of David Onley's report and get you to react to it, okay? Because he says much of the built environment in Ontario today is hostile towards people with disabilities. And I wonder if you feel that in your everyday life.
I do.
How so?
Well, I can tell you right now that from what I see in my professional life, accessibility is not considered as part of the development. It's not part of the plans. People should be aware that disability does not discriminate. At any given time, you can become part of this community of people that face barriers every day in just doing things like reading a sign. So society dictates that how I'm going to navigate my life is by reading a street sign. If I don't have access to that street sign, just like someone with a disability or a First Canadian, it's not inclusive. It literally doesn't allow me or my family, because I have 2 children and a husband, and we just want to go out and celebrate as a family. But there are so many barriers like that that are very small that just say, you don't belong here. And anybody could be that person at any given day.
Here is an excerpt from the actual act, the clunky act, as David Onley described it, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Here's the quote. It's all about developing, implementing, and enforcing accessibility standards in order to achieve accessibility for Ontarians with disabilities with respect to goods, services, facilities, accommodation, employment, buildings, structures, and premises. And here's the kicker, on or before January 1st, 2025. So we're less than 6 years away from all of this. David Onley, in your view, how much progress has been made towards that goal as described in the Act?
It's almost impossible to say because there's never been a definition of what that fully accessible Ontario is.
Jason Kenney has definitely been taking some pages out of the Rob Ford populist playbook. Ford had buck a beer, Kenney says free the beer. They're both joining in the court battle to scrap the carbon tax and challenge the constitutionality. And when Jason Kenney said that he was going to fire Ed Whittemire from the Alberta Energy Regulator, I instantly thought back to the Hydro one with Mayo Schmidt and firing the $6 million man. So Kenney is all over the Doug Ford's policies. It's the bromance is strong between those two.
Well, we should say, Bruce, that Jason Kenney's obviously been in politics a lot longer than Doug Ford has, but Ford is where Kenney would like to be. What similarities do you see between the two of them?
Well, as was just said, that I mean, they're operating off of each other's copybook. It's a recipe, and listen, the Donald Trump effect as well is also something that we're seeing in Alberta. But don't underestimate the fact that it's not just Mr. Ford that's involved here. It's also the other premiers in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, possibly. And if there's a bromance with Mr. Ford, there's going to be something other than that for Andrew Scheer if he becomes the Prime Minister in the fall, because they have some big fish to fry.
Well, let's pick up on that. That's a good point. Dwayne, do you see the Alberta election as somehow being a test run for the federal election to come later this year?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a major plank of Jason Kenney's campaign is fighting Ottawa, and not just fighting Ottawa. He has a long list of people he's going to fight. So yesterday in Medicine Hat, he promised to turn off the taps of oil to British Columbia, to investigate environmental groups to see about their charitable status. He's going to hold a referendum on equalization to get pipelines through. He will join the Ford lawsuit against the federal carbon tax. You remember a couple months ago, there was a cover photo of Maclean's called The Resistance, you know, with Kenney and Scheer and Ford and more. Kenney's the leader of that group. Even before he becomes Premier of Alberta, he is more significant as a Conservative leader than Scheer is, or even Doug Ford right now.
David, I wonder if I could get you to speak, because I know you're a supporter of the Premier's and you hope that she gets reelected. She had the bad timing to come into power, as Bob Rae did back in 1990, just as your province was going through quite some disastrous economic times. The unemployment rate peaked at 9.1% in November of 2016. The latest numbers put it considerably lower, but still, in some respects, the die was cast. She was unable to get pipelines built, which was a big part of her unique selling proposition, if you like. What would you say to people who are saying, why should we re-elect the Premier? She wasn't able to get done a lot of the stuff that she said she'd get done.
Well, I guess I'm a realist about this. I've always argued that if you're elected in a time when the economy's down, you own the economy, whether or not that's your fault or not. I mean, I think the reality is, for anyone who really looks at this fairly, the reality is that Rachel Notley's got farther with that pipeline than the Conservatives ever did. But you're right. I mean, there are no shovels in the ground as of this moment. So Mr. Kenney can say nothing's happened. Your approach didn't work. Well, in fact, the only approach that has worked, and I believe the evidence is pretty strong for this, is the approach that Rachel Notley took. So it may have been someone else here, but someone else said the other day that what they thought would happen was that we would see the pipeline completed, and neither Rachel Notley nor Justin Trudeau being in a position where they could take credit for it.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, April 12th, 2019. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.